Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all are having a wonderful day. Ein wunderbar Tag. Today, we are back with episode 2 of the Right Take podcast. I hope you guys are all doing well. Today has been a very eventful day for me. This past week has been a very eventful week for me. It hasn't always entirely been fun. It's been a little bit stressful. I'm going to be entirely honest with you. Recently, I've been having some problems where about 36 hours ago, a couple of days ago now, my basement flooded. And as if that wasn't enough of a problem and frustrating thing I've had to deal with, on top of that, my hot water heater apparently is broken. Something is wrong with it. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever had to live without hot water for even just a brief period of time, but that is a luxury that you do not realize how important it is until you do not have it. Oh my goodness. There is nothing worse than taking an ice cold shower in the early morning. Now, one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because, with all this stuff that's been going on recently, I kind of have to mention I haven't had enough time this past week to watch much of LCK, LEC, and LCS. I haven't gotten really much chance to watch any LPL matches, but I've been trying to pay attention to some. I've been paying a little bit of attention and watching some VODs of the LCK, as well as paying attention and watching a few VODs of LCS, but next week I will do a much better job for you European fans of paying attention to the LEC, because there's been some exciting stuff that's been going on in LEC right now. The top two teams have been Fnatic and G2, of course, and they're going to be playing each other in this upcoming week, which I think we might get an opportunity to mention a little bit later on in the podcast and talk about very briefly. But yeah, I've been kind of busy with dealing with all this horrible, frustrating house stuff that's just been a nightmare to take care of everything, Oh my goodness, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it has been a good opportunity to be a little bit physical. That's one of the things that I haven't been streaming much lately. I'm trying to think. It might have been like 3 months ago. It's been a while since I've streamed, and the last time I did stream, I talked about how I was promising, I'm going to be coming back. I'm going to be streaming frequently. It's going to be great. But of course, that has not really happened. Part of that is because there's been some stuff going on in my personal life that's been a little bit difficult to deal with, where I haven't really been, there hasn't actually been a lot of opportunity for me to just sit down and stream. But on top of that, I also haven't really had a super strong desire to, because especially now that it's summer, I've been wanting to go and get more physical. I've been wanting to go out and have fun, enjoying the nice weather. Streaming is something that a lot of people think as a really easy job. They think it's a really easy thing because all you get to do is sit down and play video games for a long period of time. But it has a little bit of an issue with it. Maybe not an issue, but it's a trade-off, because it's actually a really physically awful feeling for some people, at least. I don't know if other people feel this way, but personally, I don't like the feeling of sitting down in the same spot for like 8 hours at a time. That's what streaming is. If you're streaming, you have to stream for long periods of time, 6 hours, 8 hours, and you can't ever take a break. You can't ever go go for a 30-minute jog or something. You can't. The most of a break you're going to be able to get is to stand up and go use the bathroom for 2 minutes. You don't really get much of an opportunity to do anything else. You don't get an opportunity to go be physical, doing anything physical. You can't even cook or anything or stand up that much. It's a pretty frustrating and awful feeling to just sit down and not really do anything for an 8-hour stretch. That's something that's it can be fun sometimes. I've certainly had plenty of great moments streaming, and I do intend to come back streaming sometime in the near future. I'd actually really like to stream some of Teamfight Tactics when that comes out. I'm very impatient for Teamfight Tactics, but for the most part, I haven't really gotten. I haven't really streamed much lately. I haven't been playing much League of Legends at all lately, and that's been a little bit of a blessing in disguise. As awful and frustrating as all of this housework is, it has been nice to get a little bit more physical, get the blood pumping. It's been something I've been enjoying a little bit. But yeah, I am excited to come back and start streaming a little bit more. I do want to see if I can pick up. Yeah, I'd really like to play Teamfight Tactics, and I really hope that it's good. I haven't played much of auto chess, but I've seen a few people. I've followed a couple of streamers myself who play it pretty regularly, and it seems interesting. And anything that's new in the world of video games is always something that I think is paying attention to, or is worth paying attention to. Excuse me. So much of the video game industry really seems to be about copying each other. And even Teamfight Tactics is League of Legends copying another thing from Dota. But it's still a new thing. And this is an entirely new thing in that, there's been a lot of circumstances over the years where, Hearthstone comes out, so everybody's making card games. League of Legends comes out, so everybody's making MOBAs. PUBG comes out, or H1Z1, whatever the first Battle Royale thing was, so everybody's making Battle Royales. And it gets so boring so quickly. Not only is it something that's frustrating because you have... not only is it something that it sucks because that's all you're pounded with is Battle Royale games over and over. And if you don't like Battle Royale, you're shit out of luck. You're hearing nothing but Battle Royale games. You're seeing nothing but memes about Battle Royale games. People talk about nothing but Battle Royale games on social media. But on top of that, if you want to get into one of them, it typically feels like it's something where I can't even do that because it's too late. I'm too late to the party. Fortnite is something that I never played Fortnite before in my life. And it still feels like a very new thing to me. It feels like Fortnite just blew up and became a big thing relatively recently. But now people are talking about how Fortnite is dying, how, I forget the name of the company that makes it. Is it Epic Games? Whoever it is. They're killing they're killing Fortnite. It's got all these gameplay problems. It's dead now. It's a horrible battle royale. Now it's Apex Legends, or now it's fucking whatever, right? It's a really weird thing how frequently video games and just game genres in particular will blow up and become a big deal, but then they have like this really weird life cycle that if you aren't there from the beginning of it, it's really difficult to follow and pay attention to all of it. So anyway, point being, I'm very excited for Teamfight Tactics because auto chess is still a really new thing. It's a really new thing that happened very, very recently and can be, this could be a really fun thing. I don't know that much about is this the kind of thing that could last for a period of time? Is this going to be anything other than another, rotating game mode for League of Legends? Or is it going to be something that's actually really cool, actually really fun, and could be something that we play for a long period of time? I don't know. I'm just excited to see something new. I'm excited to play Teamfight Tactics. I'm also kind of interested in Classic WoW. That's going to be coming out in a couple of months now, 2 months, 3 months. It's either August or September, right, that the release date is. But yeah, I'm very excited for Classic WoW as well because I never got an opportunity to play Classic WoW myself. When I was a kid, I had a computer that didn't have a graphics card, and I don't know what the actual motherboard was. Maybe it didn't have a spot for a graphics card, but I remember there were a lot of games I couldn't play because my computer couldn't handle it because the graphics card, the onboard graphics or whatever, could not handle certain games. And then I asked my mom about it, and she said, we could replace the graphics card maybe, but then it turned out that it didn't use a graphics card. So I don't know if there wasn't an opportunity to install a graphics card at all. But anyway, that's one of the reasons I played RuneScape for 14 years of my life. I'm still playing RuneScape today. Oh boy. Yeah, it's been 15 years since RuneScape came out, hasn't it? Wow, that is a long time. Or 15 years since I started playing it. Maybe 16. I started playing in 2004. Anyway, we're getting a little bit off topic. Point being, though, I haven't really had a lot of opportunity to watch a number of different VODs and stuff, but I have been trying to pay attention to what's been going on this past week in various League of Legends leagues, and there have been a couple of things I've been seeing, the first of which is the LCK. As I take a sip of my water here. So the LCK has been pretty interesting in what's been going on this past week, but the number one thing I want to talk about is Afreeca. Now, Afreeca is a team that I really like. I really like following them. Ever since they got Keen in particular, I feel like they are a very fun team to pay attention to. They have a lot going on with them. And last week, Afreeca was able to win both of their games in the LCK. So firstly, they were able to 2-0 Hanwha Life, which you could maybe say that's kind of expected, but at the same time, that's not a guarantee. Last split, Hanwha was much better than Afreeca was. Afreeca Afreeca almost got relegated while Hanwha was decidedly middle of the pack. I think they ended like 500, 9-9 or something at the end of the split. So Hanwha was pretty good. They were certainly better than Afreeca was last split, and it was not a guarantee that Afreeca was going to be able to beat Hanwha, much less 2-0 them, even if Hanwha has looked pretty weak at the start of this split. But anyway, Afreeca, they were able to beat them, so that was pretty solid. But more impressively, Afreeca played against Kingzone, and they beat them 2-1. Now, that's a pretty big deal. We talked about how Kingzone and Griffin, they're essentially the two teams that have looked like the front runners of being able to keep up with the international meta. We've talked in the last podcast about how right now there's an international meta in League of Legends where Korean teams don't really, they haven't been good at adapting to it. Currently, you're really supposed to have a lot of pace with which you play in the international meta. You're supposed to be able to team fight. You're supposed to be able to consistently fight, go for early plays, go for early objectives. That's not the Korean style. The Korean style is never take a fight unless you know you can win it. I don't know if any of you guys know much about law, or if any of you are lawyers or have parents that are lawyers or anyone that wants to be a lawyer. But one thing about being a lawyer, if you're doing law, if you're actually like in a courtroom, if you're in a trial, you're never supposed to ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. You're never supposed to ask a question in the courtroom that you don't already know the answer to. And that's how Koreans have played League of Legends. Koreans never want to take a team fight unless they already know who's going to win it. They never want to take a team fight unless they already know who's going to win it. So right now, where you see a lot of teams like Invictus Gaming, a lot of teams like G2, a lot of teams just like everybody in China, they're playing with a lot of pace. There's a lot of team fighting that's going on. There's a lot of early game fights that you're seeing. There's a lot of consistent, like aggressive plays that teams are going for where they don't know necessarily are they going to be able to come out on top. But maybe they think they have a slight edge, or maybe they think that they can do something that will be worth the trade. Even if they don't always make the play happen, even if they end up losing the team fight 40% of the time, the fact that they win it 60%, the fact that they can maybe do something that will help them win that game is a really important thing. And if you pay attention to some of the Korean teams that have been trying to learn that meta, some of the Koreans that have been trying to adopt it, they have not been doing a good job. It's almost comical how bad some of the teams are. The only two teams that really seem to have a solid grasp are Griffin and Kingzone. SKT, they're playing 50-minute games against Jin Air, where they can't close out a game in 15 minutes against the worst team in LCK. But Kingzone and Griffin, they're having these solid games. They're going for the early fights. They're closing out games at 20, 28 minutes, 29 minutes, 30 minutes. They're the only teams that aren't having these 50-minute clown fiestas. But Afreeca was able to beat him. And that is a significant thing. We spent a lot of time last week talking about Kingzone and how great and exciting their storyline is. But Afreeca being able to beat Kingzone is a really big deal. There are some other teams that have been having success in LCK. We have seen, even just this past week, Griffin ended up losing to Sandbox, right? Yeah, Sandbox was able to beat Griffin this past week. So, okay, maybe not everybody is invincible at the top of the LCK. Maybe okay, that's fine. That's still a significant thing. Sandbox being able to beat Griffin. Okay, maybe Sandbox also has a little bit of a grasp of the international meta as well. But Afreeca is a really interesting storyline to follow because Sandbox already showed a lot of promise last split. Afreeca, though, they have been really up and down. And I would really like to see Afreeca do well. I have a Keen jersey. I have a Keen Afreeca lapel pin that I wore on a suit to a Christmas party this past year. They're a team that I think it would be really neat to see them do well. Firstly, Keen is just a really fun player to watch. I obviously pay attention to top lane more than most other roles. If I'm watching a team fight, I'm typically watching the top laners, seeing what they're going to do. And Keen is one of the most fun top laners to watch. On top of that, I think Keen might be the best top in the world at the moment. That might be a controversial statement. Some people might disagree. But if you don't think Keen is the best top in the world, I would ask you, who do you think is better? Right now, Khan looks like he's fucking bronze, okay? Khan is playing atrociously compared to what he has back when he could have challenged for being the top or the best top laner in the world. Smeb, KT Rolster is still looking pretty weak, and Smeb is definitely in the tail end of his career. You can maybe say the Shy. The Shy is certainly a very good top laner. He had a lot of promise and a lot of really great plays at MSI, but even then, they lost to Team Liquid at MSI. Invictus Gaming did. And, he certainly has a lot of talent, and Invictus Gaming is still a very strong team, but I don't know if you could look at the Shy's playing, say he's clearly better than Keen. Even if you might disagree and say, oh, the Shy or Wonder or whoever, you could make arguments for other players being better, but Keen really is one of the strongest tops in the world right now, specifically because a lot of the other tops are certainly looking weaker. A lot of the other top laners in the world right now are looking a lot weaker, and it's really interesting to see. I think right now he's certainly the best top laner in LCK, just because all the LCK tops are definitely looking weaker, and he's finally getting to win. That's the thing that's really interesting, is that certainly the story of Afreeca extends beyond top lane, but Afreeca really came into prominence when they got Keen. For a long time, they had a number of... excuse me. For a long time, Afreeca had a number of different players that they've been cycling through. They've been around for 3 years or whatever, and they've had a middling amount of success. Ever since they got into LCK, I believe they acquired a team that was in LCK, but ever since Afreeca was the name of the team, ever since Afreeca branded this team in LCK, they have never taken first in anything. They have never gotten, they've never had any first place finishes, even in like a Korean regional finals. They were able to get second a couple of times since acquiring Keen. They've had a lot of promise. They got second at the 2018 spring finals in LCK, losing to Kingzone then. They finished second in the regular season there as well. They've had a couple of great splits. They got third place in the 2018 summer playoffs, and have finished in like the top 5 pretty regularly, but they've never taken first in anything. Whenever the team got promoted into LCK, maybe you could say that's like a first place finish or whatever, but being one of the 2 teams to win promotion into LCK, that's not a super big accomplishment. And Afreeca has never had a gold medal to show for it. I talked a lot about how about KT Rolster in my most recent documentary. That's the focus of our most recent documentary. And KT Rolster is an interesting team because they have had some of the most talented teams that you have ever seen in League of Legends. But they've never been able, until 2018 summer, they were never able to take home a title. And the interesting thing about that is, they're a team that a lot of the time you can look at super teams and see, okay, let's say SKT, right? You can build a great super team that flounders or that fails, that just flops around not really doing anything and sucks, right, if we're being blunt. But the interesting thing about KT is that they actually built some very good teams. This wasn't just super team syndrome where they would go and try and create some sort of mishmash super team that would fail, because super teams often fail. They were actually able to build really great teams. Really great super teams, some really great teams in general that weren't necessarily super teams, but had some really talented individual players like Score, but they were never able to finish first, right? And that's something that kind of sucks, because in League of Legends, if you don't finish first, and if you don't go to Worlds and represent your region as the best team at Worlds, or the best team of your region at Worlds, then you don't get respect, sadly. The international community in League of Legends only respects the teams that go to Worlds. They can't even name the other Vietnamese teams other than Phong Vu Buffalo. They can't even name the Taiwanese teams that don't make it to Worlds. Unless you're someone that really pays attention to that region for whatever reason, you don't really care, much less respect, the teams that don't make it to international play. Those are the teams that get all the glory and all the fame. So, KT Rolster is a great example of a team that has not gotten nearly enough credit for all the great League of Legends they've put on over the years. But Afreeca is like KT, but even worse because they've never won anything. KT, at least they had a victory with the Arrows. At least they've been around for a long period of time. They won a couple Korean regional finals, I think, to like make it to one Worlds in 2015. But Afreeca has never won anything. They've made one Worlds on championship points because they got second and third in the 2018 season. But yeah, they've never been able to win anything, and it would be a really cool story to see Afreeca go and win this split of LCK now that they're on the upswing. And right now, they're currently like a top 3 team in Korea in terms of the placing, even though it's still obviously very early on in the split. But it's also a very interesting story to see them because, last split, they were really bad. I mentioned they were fighting to not get relegated. And part of the reason for that was because they were trying to just find a roster that worked. They played, get this, okay? They played 11 different players in that split. The only player that they did not sub out was Keen. Every other role, they had 3 different players, 4 different players trying to play all those different roles and find some combination of players that worked. They had this one weird experiment where they had this player, Brook, who's a top laner. They put him mid lane and tried to see if he would maybe work for the team. That obviously did not pan out. They tried to play Brook top and throw Keen mid. Like, they really tried to say, okay, we're going to sacrifice this split. We're not going to be making playoffs, clearly, but let's try and find something that works. Let's try and find some players that have some level of chemistry together, some players that can do something, and just let's find something that works. That's what they were trying to do. And they did, eventually. UCal, who they were able to get from KT Rolster, who did not play well in Spring Split, and that's one of the reasons they were consistently subbing him out, he's looking a lot better now. And right now it seems as though they have a pretty solid roster that they're going to be sticking with, hopefully. And I really hope they win. That would be so great, dude. That would be a really great storyline to go from, being on the downside ever since they kind of embarrassed Korea by losing to Cloud9 3-0, and then we're just struggling so hard in the spring split of 2018 to see them go and finally get things together and finally get Keen a great roster and hopefully use all the talent they have in the same way that KT Rolster eventually did after so many years. And if they could finally win an LCK split, that would be amazing. That would be such an amazing story. I'm really rooting to see that hopefully happen. Oh my goodness, that would be great. They are a team that has never won anything before. If they could, that would be great. I really hope. I really hope we see Afreeca finally put everything together and win something. Now, while Afreeca is obviously on the uprise, SKT continues to fall and flounder. We talked about this a little bit in the last podcast, but we have to mention it again because SKT lost both of their games this past week, right? Who did they play against? They played, I forget who they played against this past split. I don't think I mentioned, I don't think I wrote it down in my notes. But right now, the only series that SKT has won is against Jin Air. And even that, they almost lost. They almost got 2-0'd by Jin Air. And if they did, they would be dead last in LCK right now. That would be something, itchy nose. That would be something that would be really, really funny to see. I made a prediction at the start of the LCK split. I predicted how I expected the regular season to go. And my top 3 finishes for the summer split here, I said Griffin would finish first, Kingzone would finish second, and SKT would finish third. Now, part of the reason why I said SKT would finish third was because, firstly, I have expressed how little I believe in this roster, how they have been playing, etc., etc. And I've talked about that, right? I've talked about that ad nauseum. But also, I only put them at third because I was like, okay, it is still SKT. They will probably still do well. Okay, I'll put him at third. Most people were saying they were going to finish first. I think Esports Writer, he put SKT at first. I think LS might have put SKT at first in his predictions. So I was like, okay, I'm not being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but thinking SKT is not going to finish first is apparently a contrarian opinion. So I'll just put him at third. I can't put him any lower, I guess. I wish I did though, because right now they are 8th. The only teams they are ahead of right now are Hanwha Life and Jin Air, which again, They almost lost to Jin Air. They would be dead last if they didn't win that game. They are looking really weak, though. If I were to revise those picks, I would certainly put Afreeca ahead of them. I might even put Sandbox ahead of them. I think Sandbox beat them this past week, right? Like, I think they are looking very, very weak as it is right now. And I think this is significant, okay? Excuse me. I think it's significant. I don't think that this is just another circumstance of SKT having a weak early game, a weak start, but then coming into their own later on in the split, having a great playoff run, winning playoffs. That's something we've seen. That's something we've seen with SKT. That's something we've seen with a number of other Korean teams, like Samsung famously. We could maybe see it again. That is something that could very well happen again, but I don't think that's the case. I think this is different. I think right now, we're maybe seeing the beginning of the twilight years of SK Telecom. And let me explain my reasoning before you call me an idiot. This roster in particular spells danger for the hopes of SKT ever gaining the significance and success that they did previously. You have to remember, so throughout all of 2018, SKT struggled. During the 2018 spring split, they finished like 500, going 9-9, and did okay pretty well. They made playoffs, but then weren't really able to make any noise in playoffs. Then they missed out on playoffs entirely in the summer split, and you can kind of say, okay, that's fine. It's a problem with the roster. You can say they have Faker, and Faker's amazing, but they weren't able to surround him with great talent. The players that they had previously had, a lot of success with, and the players that they had, the other former teammates of Faker weren't playing up to the success that they previously had in those other years. On top of that, they weren't really able to get any new players. They weren't really able to get any new players to have success with Faker either. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat here. So you could say 2018 SKT, that sucks, but it's still SK Telecom. And because of that, they're going to be able to use their clout, use their name, use the promise of playing with Faker to go and acquire great free agents, and they'll fix that, right? And that's what they did. SKT went out, they used their money, they used their name, they used their clout to go out and assemble a super team. They have Teddy, they have Klid, they have Khan, who was playing very well at the time they got him, but it's just looking horrible right now. I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but this is something that I've kind of talked about and have kind of predicted. You know, a lot of people have looked at SKT. They saw them finish top 3 in the spring split. They saw them 3-0 Kingzone and 3-0 Griffin and said, you know, they fixed it. This is just typical SKT. They had a weakness that they were able to correct, that Keikomo was able to whip all the players into shape, and now they're dominant again. This is just like the life cycle of SKT that continuously ends up happening. But if you watched those games, if you watched the spring finals in particular, and saw the SKT versus Kingzone series, that was not a game SKT, or that was not a series SKT won. That was a series that Kingzone lost. Same deal with Griffin. That was not a series SKT won. That was a series that Griffin lost. While Griffin and Kingzone, they were very talented. They had a lot of great players. They could have done very well. They had clear issues in their own play where they could have won, though, at the very least, they could have won games in those series. But they choked. They threw it away. They threw it away for Griffin. It was just their inexperience, their players that were not very, they weren't very experienced and didn't have a lot of great, I don't know what you would call it, but they didn't have, like, if you want to call it a clutch factor. They weren't able to perform when under pressure, and then it got into their head, and they had a little bit like of a mental breakdown in terms of their attitude and everything towards the series. Just running it back, doing the salty run back in Game 3 with the Talia Pantheon bot again. And Kingzone, they were ahead. The first 2 games, they were ahead in both of them and should have been able to close out the series and win. LS was commentating those games and said, this is all Kingzone has to do and they win. And they didn't do it. They just didn't know how to close it out. Those series should have gone at least into multiple games, not just being a 3-0 sweep. At the very least. Because SKT wasn't really doing anything special. They were playing their style of just sit back and hope the enemy makes mistakes so they can win. And that shouldn't work in this meta, but the inexperience of the rosters they were playing against, the youthfulness of the players not having just professional experience for a long period of time overall, those players ended up making those mistakes, and they faltered and failed. Now, SKT's representing Korea at Worlds, or at MSI, excuse me. They're representing Korea at MSI. They go to MSI. They struggle. I don't want to take anything away from G2. G2 did a great job crushing them. Congratulations to G2. But this is why I'm saying SKT is not as great as they once were. They are really a team that they have been struggling ever since 2018. And they thought they fixed it with this super team. But it wasn't the super team working perfectly. It was the super team having a certain level of skill because all of those players are incredibly talented. It is a super team after all. And the teams they played against weren't able to take advantage of the great leads they got. The teams they played against weren't able to exploit the issues SKT has. And so SKT looked like they were back to their old selves, but they weren't because it wasn't them playing well. It was the other teams that sometimes took advantage of the problems SKT had, but weren't ever able to close out games. So anyway, the reason I say that this is different is, this is troubling because I don't want to say SKT is dead, obviously. This is still week 2 or week 3 or whatever of LCK. But this is not, it doesn't look good. SKT struggling with their previous roster in 2018. Okay. All they have is Faker. Everything else is very weak, very uninspired, does not look good, and obviously looks, you can make a lot of excuses for 2018. But then they did everything they were supposed to do. They went out and got all these great players. They went out and built this crazy good team. It was a mixture of players that were already established, like Khan, who was just an amazing top laner, probably best in the world at the time they acquired him, while also being a mixture of other players like Teddy, who a lot of people saw his talent, but, he was not someone that was already established as this great AD carry necessarily. He wasn't the best AD carry in LCK, clearly, or anything like that. So the reason I say, I really hesitate to say this because I don't want to spell out SKT's doom and say that they're dead. Because, that's something that people have done so many times in the past. And SKT has always come back and won a world championship in response to that. But I can't help but feel how do you get better from this? How do you get better from going out and acquiring almost every player that's the best at their role in the world in an off season? You can say, with 2018, again, just to reiterate, okay, maybe Faker's just struggling to carry bad players around him. All you have to do is surround him with more talent, surround him with better players. Right now, they have the best. They have Klid and Teddy and Khan, and how do they get better from here? See, this is really going to define, I think, this is going to define K Koma's career. Koma. I'll call him Koma because that's what his actual name is. I like calling him K Koma, though. This is the hardest test he's ever faced because he has to do, this is on him now. It's not fair that it's on him, but right now he is going to be the thing that makes or breaks SKT. If SKT falters, then K Koma is human. If SKT falters, Koma is human. But if he is able to whip this roster into shape, this roster that should be last in LCK right now, if he's able to take this roster and make them champions of LCK again against, this split, Griffin is going to be more experienced. Kingzone's going to be more experienced. Afreeca is finally looking good. Sandbox is looking good again. If Coma is able to take this SKT roster and make playoffs with them, and then go and win playoffs, and then go to Worlds and have success at Worlds, even if they don't win Worlds, they make a finals or semifinals, then that is going to be an incredible accomplishment. I mean, that is something that is going to be one of the greatest accomplishments we've seen in League of Legends history. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Coma is human. I think SKT is human, and I don't think they're going to be able to put things together. They might make Worlds on championship points because they did obviously win last split, and that gives them a huge bunch of championship points. All they really have to do is make playoffs, I think, and then for the most part, they're probably given a... it kind of depends. We might get into some really interesting playoff scenarios for Worlds qualification and who makes it on championship points. But I think SKT, if they I don't think they're going to make it from winning the summer split. I think they're going to have to make it on championship points, which might be a kind of easy thing to do, but I could see them pulling a Gen G. I could see them pulling an Afreeca and do just the same thing that happened with those teams last split. Or last Worlds. Excuse me. I don't know, man. I don't know. This is certainly this is a really hard test for Coma. He has to bring SKT away from the brink of extinction because, again, they probably won't disappear as an organization. They'll probably still be around because Faker is still going to be around because this is still a huge team, right? This is still a huge and legendary team with tons of brand recognition and everything. They're rebranding and everything next year to try and increase their brand recognition even more. But I can't help but think that if they don't pull things together with this roster, then they're going to just be middle of the pack for a while. They're going to have to go into the middle of the pack, bottom of LCK for a while and try and find some... They're going to have to try and find some like Griffin-like team, some Kingzone-like team, where it's not a super team, but where they're just trying to find some people with talent that work together. They're going to have to pull in Afreeca like last split and just start subbing people in and out and try and figure out what combination of players have some synergy, because we went out and tried to get every player that was the most skilled in LCK, and it got us last place almost. This week is going to be really interesting to watch. I actually don't know the schedule for SKT this week, but they need to start pulling things together soon, and I'm really curious to see if that's going to be able to happen. We're in summer right now. We are in summer. It's June 17th. We're going to have to see what happens, because before you know it, August is going to be here. September is going to be here. August is going to be here. We're going to be at Worlds. We're going to be at LCK finals. We're going to have to see, they don't have that much time left. But anyway, I'll try and go ahead and move on, because I certainly have been bashing SKT quite a lot over the years. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about LCS and NA, because that's the other region that I've been spending a little bit of time paying attention to and trying to see a little bit of what happens. There's a really funny thing right now, currently, as of June 17th, 2019. At the moment, Echo Fox has one win. They're 1-5. They are looking like one of the, bottom teams in LCS. And their one win is against Team Liquid. They played against 100 Thieves this past week, who was the worst team not even a competition. They were the worst team in LCS last split. They lost to 100 Thieves. Their only win that they've been able to muster is against Team Liquid. Right now, there's also a 6-way tie for first place. A 6-way tie. There are 6 playoff spots, and there is a 6-way tie for first place between Optic, Team Liquid, TSM, Golden Guardians, C9, and CLG. All those teams are 4-2 right now, tied for first place. And this leads into an issue I want to talk about, which is right now I think we need best of threes in LCS and LEC. At the moment, in LCK, there are best of threes, and in LPL, there are best of threes. And right now, I think we need to bring those back for NA and EU, or at least bring back best of twos. Best of twos like we had in OGNs way back when. Now, the last time we had best of threes was in 2017, I think. I think it was spring, summer of 2017. That was the last time we saw best of threes in LCS. And, you know, the reason we got rid of them was because it actually was pretty boring sometimes. If you're watching Echo Fox play against Team Envious, the two of the worst teams in LCS, how are you supposed to bill an Echo Fox Team Envious best of three series? How are you supposed to say, viewers, I want you to take 2.5 hours out of your day to watch these two horrible LCS teams play against each other in these clown fiestas. Go have fun. Let's watch this. That was a really boring thing to watch. And that, you know, there weren't a lot of fun series when you saw best of threes in 2017 for LCS and back then EU LCS. If you're watching a really good team stomp a really bad team, that's not fun. Who wants to watch TSM crush Team Envious in a best of three? Who wants to watch two really bad teams like Envious and Echo Fox play against each other in a best of three? The only fun series, the only interesting series to see would be when you would see like TSMC9, when you would see two of the top teams play against each other and both go after each other, try and make some, you know, amazing series that could be an exciting preview for the, you know, potential summer split finals, the potential spring split finals. That was the only really exciting and fun thing to see and pay attention to. You couldn't really convince people to watch like a Dignitas Echo Fox, Dignitas Envious best of three. And at the end of the day, I think it was a smart thing to remove. I think it was a really good decision to remove the best of threes at the time. But we need to bring it back. And the reason we may need to bring it back, in my opinion, is right now, fun matches aren't nearly as hype, and there's a lot more reason to watch bad teams. So firstly, like with, there have been a couple of teams that have beat Team Liquid. There have been Echo Fox and CLG. And the CLG circumstance, CLG beating Team Liquid is a really interesting thing. Because right now, is CLG on the upswing? CLG has been a really bad middle-of-the-pack team for a long time. They've been decidedly mediocre. They have not had a lot of promise. They haven't made Worlds in a while. They haven't won an NILCS split in a while. But are they on the upswing? They beat Team Liquid. They're tied for first in this big six-way tie. They could be good. They could be getting good again. That could be a really fun thing. That could give a lot of hope and exciting potential to CLG fans. Is Ruin working out as this great top laner? Well, right now we have no idea because best of ones are the most fluky thing in the world. League of Legends is a game that is so fluky when you only have a best of one at least that it's really difficult to make the argument that this is a legitimate thing that isn't just false hope for CLG fans. Right now, Optic, they got first in the table a moment ago. They were, before this week, the only undefeated team in NA. Are they actually getting good? They got taken over by Immortals. They're going to be rebranding as Immortals. Are they bringing back glory to the Immortals name and potentially winning an NALCS split? Going on to Worlds, maybe having a great showing at Worlds? That could be a really exciting thing to see. Are these legitimate moves upward from mediocre teams that are now getting better and going to be challenging the C9s and TSMs and Team Liquids of the world and saying, no, we are now the best teams in North America? That's something that we have no idea whether it's actually true or not, because all we have right now are best of ones. The thing with best of ones that sucks is that there is no serious hype for a TSM Team Liquid series, because even if that ends up being the summer split finals the way it was the spring split finals, who cares who wins that? There is no meaningful glory to be won in a best of one. Nobody cares if you win a best of one like that. That doesn't mean anything for your team or your legacy. That doesn't mean anything. That's a really, really disappointing fact of how best of ones currently work. It's hard to make any argument that a team that wins is actually good or a team that loses is actually bad. If a team that wins is actually good, how is Echo Fox beating Team Liquid? How's Team Liquid losing to Echo Fox? Even the bad teams are now fun to watch. That's the reason why we should bring best of threes back, is because when best of threes were removed, they were because it was really hard to build a fight with a bad team. It was really hard to say, come watch Team Liquid stop Echo Fox in a best of three. Come watch to see two bad teams play. Come watch Dignitas play Team Envious. But now it's more exciting. Now it's more fun. Because now that we have franchising, and now that you can be a fan of Echo Fox, Riot has really tried to emphasize, hey, be a fan of bad teams. Be a fan of teams that are bottom of the table right now, because those teams can get good. 100 Thieves can be a team that makes it to Worlds and embarrasses NA at Worlds, but has a really solid split and ends up making it to Worlds. That can be a thing that happens. That can be a really cool, exciting, fun thing that happens. So go and be a fan of bad teams. Go buy the 100 Thieves merchandise. Buy an Echo Fox jersey. That could be a really, you can be rooting for a team that might be good one day and isn't just doomed to be relegated. And because of that, these teams have had fan bases that have grown. I mentioned in the last podcast, I've become partial to Echo Fox. I really like Echo Fox, and I want to root for them. They have a lot of cool, exciting stuff that, even though they look very bad right now, they have some really cool, fun prospects to follow. They have Lost, that guy from New Zealand, right? They have Yasui, who might look like one of the better mid laners from North America. He could take over the role of starting mid laner from Phoenix. I mean, he looked pretty promising in the few games I've seen of him play on Echo Fox. They can develop some really good, solid players, but how are you supposed to really get hyped about them? Oh, they lost one game against 100 Thieves. Oh, that's a really fun way to pay attention to developing prospects. Oh, they won a fluky game against Team Liquid. You can't really get a sense of saying, oh, wow, this is a really exciting thing to see because we have best of ones where anything can happen. At this point, you don't really care anymore about anything can happen. I've talked in the past, Riot, one of the big reasons they like to have best of ones is because there's more potential for upsets. Echo Fox can be Team Liquid. It's a potential upset that might happen. That can be a really fun thing to see. But nobody cares. Nobody cares if you beat Team Liquid in a best of one. That's not an exciting thing anymore. What's exciting is the prospect of you actually getting good. And that's the real excitement of franchising, is that any team that could be bottom of the split right now could be at Worlds next year. Any team that could be as bad as they are at the moment, 100 Thieves who are looking like the Cleveland Browns of LCS, they can be good. They can win a split. They can go to Worlds. They could maybe even have a great showing at Worlds if they can keep their act together. That's what you want to see, and that's why you root for a team. You root for a team to see the eventual path to becoming good. And right now, that path is not visible. You can't see it. You can't see a team getting better when you're only watching best of ones. We need more. We need best of threes, because best of threes would make the good teams so much more fun to watch. You would actually see, is Team Liquid good? Are they bad? Are they just having a post-MSI hangover? Are they actually still best team in North America, or do they actually have some flaws? It would be so much more exciting and fun to watch huge series. G2's playing Fnatic this week. That would be hype as shit. Two undefeated teams in the LEC. G2, the most dominant team ever. Fnatic, maybe the most historic EU team ever, clashing against each other when they're both undefeated. That would be hype as shit if it was actually meaningful. There's no reason to watch that. I mean, you can certainly watch it for the entertainment aspect of, oh, I'm a G2 fan. I want to watch G2 win. Oh, I'm a Fnatic fan. I want to see the upset. It would be really exciting, though, if it was actually some sort of indicator of how both teams are going. But right now, being a best of one, that's no indicator. Whoever wins that, they can't really hold that too high. Whoever loses that, they can make so many excuses for why they lost. Imagine if G2 ends up losing that against Fnatic. Do you think anybody's actually going to think, oh, G2, they're no longer best team in Europe. Fnatic has now taken over Europe, And G2, who had just won MSI, who looks like possibly the best team in the world, they're no longer best in Europe. It's Fnatic now. Please bring back best of threes, right? I really, really want to have best of threes back because the fun matches against the two powerhouses is going to be so much more exciting. The people who want to root for bad teams, people like me who want to follow Echo Fox and see their journey to hopefully go from being one of the bottom teams in NALCS to then improving and hopefully eventually becoming really good. Those journeys are going to be so much more visible, so much more fun to watch, so much more exciting to see developing players. It's going to be so much more. And the mediocre teams, too. Again, you'll actually see when they really do get better, when they do get good, when CLG is actually getting back to their former glory and not just winning a few fluky games against Team Liquid. I really hope we can move back to best of threes because League would be so much more exciting if we did. Anyway, though, moving on to our next subject here. I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about some news that occurred. There was some news that came out recently this past week where 100 Thieves released Piglet. That got me thinking. With 100 Thieves releasing Piglet, I bet, Piglet, he can certainly get another gig playing for another team. But, wow. North American teams really overvalue Koreans. Western teams in general, but some EU teams are moving on. Some EU teams are still trying to rely on Korean imports, but, the top few EU teams, G2 doesn't have any imports. They don't have any Koreans. I don't think Fnatic right now has any Koreans. Teams in general, but especially North American teams and some of the middling to poor EU teams, they really overvalue Koreans. And teams don't view talent the right way. Back in the day when North America got a lot of money and people were able to go and cause the great Korean exodus. Koreans were leaving Korea because their teams weren't paying them nearly as much as they could earn overseas. North America had a huge influx of Koreans, and some of them were really good. A lot of North American teams thought we can buy some of the best players in the world. Why wouldn't we? And then there were a ton of Koreans that came over, especially former world champions. Impact and Piglet were two of the best examples of this, where both of them came to North America. And Team Liquid, they were actually one of the first teams to spend big money on some of these players like Piglet. And they struggled hard. They struggled really hard even when they got these great players. And there were so many, Koreans. There was Phoenix. There was Helios. For those of you who don't know, he was the former jungler for Azubu Blaze and CJ Blaze. One of the best players in the early history of League of Legends. He came over. Rush. He came over and has been here ever since. Seraph. He was here. I don't think Seraph's playing anymore, but he had a pretty long career playing for a number of North American teams. He has NA residency, I think. These were all Koreans who got pulled over to North America, got offered these huge contracts to come and live in Los Angeles, and they had virtually no success. At least when they first got here. Maybe some of those players, Impact, he's had some great success on Cloud9 recently, but most of those players, particularly when they first got here, they did not have much success, if any. And the problem with pulling Koreans over is, firstly, no single Korean is good enough to carry a bad team. League of Legends in general is a game where it's all about teamwork. It's all about a team playing together as a unit and not just getting individual superstars. This isn't the NBA where you go and you just get LeBron James and suddenly you're an amazing team. And pulling Koreans over, there are so many things that can go wrong with a Korean moving to Los Angeles. And then there's a language barrier. And then there's a huge cultural barrier. And then there's a different play style. And this player has to adjust to living in LA, dealing with homesickness, dealing with, having new friends, new people that he interacts with every single day of his life. and also adjusting to the new play style and adjusting to playing in a new team and adjusting to all these things. There are so many different opportunities for discord there. But the big problem about all this is it really shows how teams view talent in a really weird way. A lot of people when they look at these imports and everything, the reason Riot has some kind of lax import rules is because it's only fair. The way import rules work, for those of you who don't know, is you have to become a resident of the country that you're living in. You have to get a green card in North America. And then you are allowed to be a resident and not take up an import slot. And the idea behind that is if there's some kid who moves to America when he's 4 years old. There was a writer that commented on this on Reddit recently. If there's some kid that moves to America from Italy when he's 4 years old and spends the majority of his life living in America, but he's not a natural-born citizen, and maybe doesn't even have citizenship. He hasn't gone through the process of getting citizenship. He's just a kid that is living with his parents who are, resident workers or whatever. That kid, he's a resident of the region. He's not an Italian. He's an American. That's the whole thing with America. America is a country of immigrants, and you have a lot of players that are currently playing in North America that have situations like that. Xmithy, he was born in the Philippines. Cody Sun and Biofrost, they were born in China. Viper was born in Syria. But they're Americans. You don't want to have the country of birth being the thing that really defines the residency of a player. But teams are abusing that. Teams are essentially just trying to turn fucking NALCS into StarCraft, where there's nobody actually born or from the country. There are no resident players. Everybody is just an import that eventually gains residency. Every team is trying to do that because teams have this really weird and fucked up way they view talent, where they view talent as this inherent thing that it's weird. They think it's I shouldn't generalize, I guess, but they think talent is just this raw skill that a player is born with that's stagnant. That if they can identify a great player, that player will be great and will always be great, and their talent is just, it's there. No player can improve in talent. No player can get worse. If you will go and you get Piglet from the former World Championship SK Telecom roster, you are going to have a former world champion, or a player who can play as a former world champion for years and years and years. And that's obviously has not been what happened. Piglet, he has played on Team Liquid. I mean, he's played in general just on a lot of teams that have been pretty horrible. Nobody has really been able to take the success that he has previously had and harness it in any sort of meaningful way. And the reason for that is because he did not have success on SKT because he was an individually incredible player. He was a very incredible player individually when he played for SKT, but that's not why he had success. The reason he had success was because SKT played as a unit so well. That's the thing that makes League of Legends an exciting esport to follow. That's what's so cool about it. League of Legends, when you see a good League of Legends team, it's like the Beatles, right? I don't know that much about, or I don't know how much you guys know about the Beatles, but if you know even just a little bit, you probably know the Beatles are kind of, I don't want to say they're awful, but the Beatles were nowhere near as great when they're individual acts as they were when they were the Beatles. John Lennon, he had one good song, Imagine. And that's the only great thing he really did in his solo career. Don't burn me at the stake, English people. The thing that made the Beatles so amazing is that even though they were not all great musical prodigies individually, they were not individually, I don't know. I don't want to say that there was no guarantee, or I don't want to say it wasn't a possibility that Paul McCartney could go off and be a great songwriter, go off and be a great, Bob Dylan kind of individual if he just had a solo career on his own. But the thing about the Beatles that really made them the greatest band ever was that they were so great together when they were not going to go off and be these great individual musical acts if they just continued as a solo musical act. Ringo was not going to go off and be the best drummer in the world if he wasn't a part of the Beatles. And that's the cool thing about League of Legends is that you can have a team like Cloud9 where all of the individual players don't necessarily have anything great about them. They can be very talented, they can be very good, but the individual player isn't what makes the team the team. But it's the team itself. It's everybody working together in that specific way. That's what makes the team great. TSM getting Björksen Björksen is not the best thing ever. Björksen is not the greatest player of all time because of his individual play or whatever, right? You have to be able to support a team around a player. And it's really hard to do sometimes. I mean, we've seen problems with TSM recently. We've seen problems with SKT trying to surround Faker with talent. You can't just get the talent itself. That's the thing. I'm starting to ramble here a little bit, but I guess the point, what I kind of want you guys to take away from all this is that the cool thing about League of Legends is that you can be like the Beatles. The sum of your individual parts is you can be greater than the sum of your individual parts. You are not just the sum of each individual player's skill level. A team is not as great as all the individual players' skill added up. A team is as great as that group of people play together. And that's how Cloud9 can go and make these rosters that are made up of all these players that nobody else is looking at, because none of these players are individually just so godly skillful that clearly they're going to go off and be the best players ever. But they can get these players that play so well together in this team environment that they can go off and win NALCS titles, paying a fraction of what the Team Liquids of the world and the TSMs of the world are paying their rosters, because they're going off and signing all these incredibly expensive players. I'm going to die on this hill. Teams need to start viewing talent differently, because it's shocking how there's just like Cloud9 and more recently TSM who are viewing teams like this, or who are viewing players like this and roster construction. I really, really hope other teams start paying attention to it more, because it's one of the coolest things in the world about League of Legends. And so few teams, particularly in North America, are trying to do anything with it. They're still just bumming Piglet around from team to team, paying him the former world champion so they can say they have the former world champion. I don't know. I really hope it changes. Here's an interesting question. Is there too much League of Legends? This is something that I got to thinking about recently, because with this podcast I'm trying to pay attention to every region in the world. I'm trying to pay attention a little bit to LCS, a little bit to LEC, a little bit to LPL, and a little bit to LCK, and then just make sure that if there's any storylines or anything going on in one of the minor leagues, that I know about it and become, educated about it, if not go and actually watch the VODs of whatever it is that's going on myself as well. And it's really difficult to do, That's a lot of League of Legends to watch. And some, in LPL and LCK, you're watching best of threes. In LPL, there's 16 teams to pay attention to. There's a lot of players and a lot of storylines to follow that it's really difficult to keep up. And this might be a problem for League of Legends in the future. I don't know if you guys know that much about recently. This past year, there was an attempt in North America to expand American football. There was a new American football league called the AAF, the Alliance for American Football. It started in February, after the Super Bowl ended, there were these 8 different teams that played, and it was meant to give a lot more American football to American football fans who wanted to watch it. And it failed pretty miserably. They didn't even make it all the way through the season before they filed for bankruptcy. They had to cut themselves off like 2/3 of the way through. And there were a number of reasons why that happened. There were a lot of financial issues and poor financial planning and problems that occurred on that end. But really, the storyline that came from this was people said, America doesn't want more football. America wants to go watch basketball. They want to watch college basketball. They want to watch the NBA. America wants to go watch hockey. They want to go watch baseball. They don't want to watch football every single day of the year. And you can have too much of a good thing, essentially. I mean, again, the NFL, it only goes for like 3 or 4 months throughout a season. Not even half the year is American football if you're living in America and paying attention to various sports. You're not following football for more than a couple of months. You're not following it for half a year. The majority of the year consists of zero football. And even that is enough. Even that, if you try and expand, people don't want more. The XFL is another new league that's trying to come next year that people are spelling doom for it. People are saying, we don't want more football. And that's something that it's interesting. Sports in general, traditional sports, esports, every sport out there, they have to balance a desire to grow with a realistic expectation of not wanting to bore the hell out of just pounding people's skulls over and over and over every day of the year. And the league, I think, might be getting almost close to that territory. I called for best of threes earlier on in this podcast. I said that we should have best of threes in NALCS and ULCS. We should have more. That's essentially saying we should have more League of Legends, more esports being played. But it's not an issue of the hours. It's not an issue of saying, oh, there are too many hours, there's not enough hours to watch. The issue is just how people view League of Legends, or how people view consuming an esport like this. Because, so to go back to that NFL example or American football example, people want to watch American football for a couple of reasons, but typically they want to follow a single team, they want to follow their home team, or they just want to follow the NFL, a single league that runs for 4 months or whatever out of the year. And they want to follow that league and follow their team, follow their local team, and pay attention to what happens with their team or their 2-3 teams, however many teams they choose to root for. And that's not at all how people pay attention to stuff in like the modern era. Because right now we live in an era where with the internet, with the advent of the internet and streaming and all this stuff, you don't have to go and watch your local team play downtown. You can watch a number of different leagues, a number of different sports over the internet all across the world. And it's really cool, but it also presents a problem where when you have limitless opportunities for something, the thing becomes so much less special. So for me, I've mentioned a few times, I have a lot of German heritage, and I've always liked Germany. Ich habe Deutsch gelernt. Ich habe für 3 Jahre Deutsch gelernt in der Schule. That's not the right word order. My German's pretty awful, but I've tried to learn some German. I want to go to Baden-Württemberg. That's where my family originally lived before they immigrated to America. Freiburg and Berzelgau. Actually, I think it's Hartheim that my family originally lived, which is like on the Rhine in southwestern Germany. I would love to go visit Germany, and natürlich, I want to follow German soccer, German football, Fußball. And it's kind of difficult to do because soccer in general is something that I really like, and I've rooted for Olympique Lyonnais ever since like 2009. I've tried to pay attention to the EPL. I've watched the World Cup every opportunity I get. I don't really watch MLS because MLS blows, but I've been paying a little bit more attention to MLS now that my local team has made it into the league. And, there's a lot of fun, exciting storylines to pay attention to in soccer, but it's difficult to because there's so much of it. And if you don't have a personal connection to it, then it's really tough to feel one with how much there is. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but for example, for me, it's really hard for me to root for Freiburg, the team of Freiburg and in the Bundesliga, because not only do I not have a connection to them, or not a legitimate connection to them. I don't live in Freiburg, but I don't. There's so much out there. There's so much soccer out there that you can pay attention to, that if the only connection you have is one where you say, I'm going to follow this team on the internet and pay attention to them, it's so hard to lose that. It's so hard to have that be like a really meaningful, strong connection the way that you have a connection to a traditional sport. So when you have limitless opportunities, the point I'm getting at, when you have limitless opportunities to consume a sport, to root for different teams, to follow stuff, it becomes so much less special and something that you do with such less fervor. People will kill everybody else at an American football game. There's a George Carlin quote where he says, baseball. When you go to baseball, you're going to the park. You're having a nice, lovely day at the baseball park. It's a relaxing experience. But at a football game, you will be assured that you're going to have at least 33 opportunities to take another human being's life. Because American football is a really intense experience. People feel a lot of fervor. They're screaming and yelling and hollering at a game. It's like a really intense experience to go to an American football game live at a stadium. But it's such a less intense thing when you're just following it by following a stream online or something, right? And when we tie all this back to League of Legends, League of Legends is something that it's really easy to follow a lot of different teams in a lot of different leagues. You can root for any team in any league, and there's so much of it that I think it's really easy to take it for granted and lose that sense of fervor. Nobody's going to be giving each other Glasgow smiles over an Afreeca Freaks versus Kingzone series the way they will for Rangers and Celtic. And I guess the I'm rambling here, but the point I'm getting at is this is going to be something that could kill League of Legends. It's a really tough thing to feel an intense connection in League of Legends the way you do with traditional sports, because it's not something you experience in person. It's all something that you experience online. And if you're just a viewer, you have, or if the majority of your fans, I should say, are just viewers, you have to be really careful about that. You can't overexpose people to stuff. You can't overexpose people and just constantly shove it down their throats, because then they're going to lose the sense of it being a special thing. And League of Legends, it's essentially a year-round thing. And there are so many different teams and leagues to follow. That's one of, maybe it's dramatic to say that would kill League of Legends, but that is one of the biggest obstacles to overcome for League of Legends and esports. For esports to become as big as traditional sports, or to have that same sort of impact, it's a really tough thing when it's everywhere, because then it's not nearly as special. I mean, there's some traditional sports that are super, super small, tiny events that don't really get much traction or much attention. Stuff like the lacrosse college championship, or some, college baseball, whatever. But stuff like that will trend on Twitter. It will be a big thing that people talk about for a brief period of time, even if they don't follow the sport or pay attention to it, because it's something that happens with such scarcity. And I can't help but wonder, it might be me just being a doomsayer that's worried about something that isn't even necessarily that big of a problem. But I can't help but wonder, this could be a bit of an issue for League of Legends. It's tough to pay attention to everything that's going on. And with how much there is going on, it's tough to really feel a connection to like root for one individual team with that same level of fervor that you might in a traditional sport. But anyway, that's just my opinion. If it isn't going to be oversaturation that hurts League of Legends and struggles to keep League of Legends as a big thing in the limelight for a long period of time, then it's going to maybe be another thing. Because the story of what we're really talking about here is, this is a subject of how do you keep something lasting for generations? You can really, if you wanted to, you can have a huge influx of money or something to try and make a really big event for a short period of time. That's what Fortnite has kind of done. Fortnite famously had $300 million or something that they tried to pump into their esports scene. It's actually $100 million, I think. But that's still a huge amount of money, right? $100 million in esports prizes. But their esports scene has struggled and failed tremendously. They are not going to be able to keep their esports scene alive if things continue going the way they are for another 3 years, much less 300. But if your goal is to really have something that lasts for generations, that you're sharing with your kids, that your kids then grow up and rooting for a team, and then their kids, they share that with their kids, and so on and so forth, the way that people do with traditional sports. If you want esports to do that same thing, then there's something that's really important that you have to pay attention to. When you talk about what kills sports, it's people not letting their kids experience it for fear of safety sometimes. That's what happened with boxing. Boxing eventually became something that was viewed as such a barbaric thing that while some people did stop watching it, the thing that really killed it was like people didn't share it with the next generation. And that's what people talk about with the NFL. The NFL is an incredibly dangerous thing. It might be the big discussion right now is it might be fundamentally a dangerous sport that leads to shorter lifespans, that leads to brain damage, that leads to you not being able to think straight when you're a 50-year-old person. And if that's the case, then that's a sad thing because the sport will almost certainly die, but the sport won't die from people just not watching it. Everybody's going to continue watching NFL. The NFL will continue being a really big thing for the next 80 years at the very least, for the rest of my life. I'm never going to stop watching the NFL because I think it's too dangerous. As long as the athletes and everything know the danger that they're getting into, then they're allowed to do whatever they want. I'm not going to say that boxing should be illegal as long as every boxer knows what they're getting themselves into. But the thing that will kill it will be when mothers don't let their children play. When parents view the sport as something so inherently dangerous that they don't allow their kid to choose that as a profession. They don't allow their kid to play for the high school football team. When the next generation, maybe it's not parents, maybe kids just get scared of it, whatever it is, when the next generation of kids doesn't go into that field, when they don't play that sport, that will be the thing that kills the sport. That's the thing that has consistently killed any sort of sport that's viewed as barbaric or dangerous. And that's something that League of Legends does now. Doesn't have to worry about. No kid's going to get brain damage from playing League of Legends. Oh, actually, that's a good opportunity for a joke. But let's be serious about this. No kid is going to be in danger from playing League of Legends. But there is similarly a difficult path for a young person to go pro. And that's an issue. There is still a very similar difficult path if you're a young person that wants to go pro. And it's comparing apples and oranges. It might not be the same sort of thing, but while there's going to be parental resistance or just fear from children and all sorts of health issues and everything that might prevent kids from going on to becoming a professional boxer or professional NFL player. There are similar obstacles and hurdles that a kid has to overcome to go and become a professional League of Legends player. And I think one of the biggest focuses Riot needs to have is an emphasis on development, for players, for the next generation of players, having a clear path for someone that shows promise and is good at League of Legends at a young age, who then can go on and become a great player, a clear path to becoming a pro. And it's a mess right now. The path to becoming a pro right now is you just play really well in solo queue, get really high rating, choose not to be a streamer, even though you can almost certainly make more money being a streamer if you can get a really big name. Have some team contact you in some way because they see you're high rated and maybe spectate your games. And then go and play for a team in like a challenger scene maybe, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, maybe you don't make the team or make the cut. Like, it's a really weird and almost mysterious way to go pro. And on top of that, there are so many other tiers of League of Legends that are completely I don't want to say unregulated, but they're not really well thought out. So if you want to talk about like the different tiers of play in association football, in soccer, there's very clearly a top league of the EPL, and then the championship, and then League One, League Two. I forget what the third and fourth and everything leagues are in the EPL or La Liga or Ligue 1. But, there's like a top tier league where the pros play, and then there's League 1, League 2, League 3, League 4, League 5, League 6. And then a very clear ladder of how talent is distributed. And in League of Legends, if you were to try and compare that same thing to League of Legends, it's a nightmare. League of Legends has the LCS. Firstly, actually, let's not say that. Firstly, League of Legends has like 10 different competitive leagues that players are all thrown around in, that pros are all thrown around in, without any sort of restriction for nationality. So there are some Koreans that play in NA, there are some NA players that play in Oceania, there are some EU players that play in NA, there are some Koreans that will play not only in NA, EU, but they'll also play in wildcard regions, they'll play in Turkey, they'll play in Brazil, they'll play in Japan. And that's significant because if you're a Korean player that wants to go and play for SK Telecom, wants to go play in the LCK, let's just say in theory that we all agree LCK is the top region in the world, even if some people might disagree. But if you want to say like the top, you're a player that wants to go play for the top team, how does that path work? Do you go and play in the challenger scene in Korea and then get promoted? Do you go play in the challenger scene for a while so people recognize your talent, and then you go play in Japan for a while so people recognize your talent, and then you go play in North America for a while, and then you go play in Europe for a while, and then you go play in Korea? Are you trying to go up a ladder like that and go to the different regions and go up a ladder? Are you, there's so many problems with how talent is distributed and how a player is supposed to go pro. And similarly, even if you just want to look at the individual leagues and say, okay, let's just restrict ourselves to North America, for instance, and say that a player is supposed to play in the worst leagues until they eventually rise up to the best. Well, there's the LCS, which is the top league in NA. There is then the challenger scene, where every pro team has a challenger team. Okay. Then, below that, there's also a collegiate scene that's really weird. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And then there's also tournaments that are just run by independent organizers. So, for instance, there are some really good players. One of my favorite players that I've actually known for a while, I haven't really spoken to him. It's not like we're really good friends or anything, but you guys may remember Nintendude X. Nintendude. He was a player that played for, It was Good Game University for a while. They became Team Coast. There's a time when they got second in the NALCS, only losing to TSM in the finals. He was a jungler at the time. He was a pro jungler. And he still has a lot of talent. There's a lot of players out there that, you might see them on Twitter or something, where they have a lot of talent. Players that are challenger and stuff. And they play in these really weird series. I think he plays for a team that's in the Player One Elite Series. I don't know where that series of tournaments or whatever is supposed to fall on the tiers of teams or the tiers of talent. Then there's the Collegiate Series in North America, which I don't know what the hell is going on with that. The Collegiate Series, from what I can tell, most of the players that play in it are like Diamond 1, Diamond 2, like not even, because it's restricted. A team can only get whoever plays League of Legends for that university, so they have to just get the best players that they possibly can and have them play together. And normally in North America, college is like where you go before that. That's a stepping stone. College is supposed to be a stepping stone, or collegiate series are supposed to be a stepping stone to the pro series. If you go and play college baseball, or you'll go to college typically because you want to get an education, and you'll maybe play college baseball, and then you'll get drafted by a Major League Baseball team, and then you'll go play in single A baseball, and then double A baseball, and triple A baseball, and then the MLB. You'll work your way up a ladder in the minor leagues, where college is like the lowest rung on that ladder. But I don't think that's how League of Legends is right now. I don't think that there's really any players that are playing in the collegiate scene in League of Legends who are thinking, okay, this is my first step, winning the collegiate championship series. That's my first step towards making my way to becoming a pro. And then, of course, every other region has their own weird different rules and ways that they have these, minor leagues. In EU, there's like the Premier Tour, or no, that's the German one, isn't it? The EU Masters or whatever it is. There's like a separate thing where a bunch of EU teams play in regional leagues and tournaments that's separate from the challenger scene, right? EU still has a challenger scene, don't they? Is that separate? Anyway. There's a lot of really weird, and it's an issue because there are so many different paths in theory that you could take if you wanted to go and try and become a pro player, that I can't help but feel like this is one of the biggest issues that, again, not to make this podcast all doom and gloom and stuff, but this is a big problem that should be addressed. This is an issue that should be addressed because that's the kind of thing that really kills a sport. Probably more so than anything else. If you have the right financial situation and you can fund a sport for a long period of time, if you can set up a proper league and get people watching it and have cool, fun, exciting, a fun product for people to view, then you can last for a while. But you're never going to be able to last for generations if you can't get the next generation of players to very clearly and easily make their way up to the pro league. And you can certainly make the argument that, the next generation of pro players who are good, they're just going to become really good and it will be obvious who they are and the teams will be able to sign them and pick them up and stuff. But player development doesn't really work that way, When you develop a player for any sport, esport or traditional sport, there is an element, especially as the sport becomes more popular and more robust, there is an element of needing to coach players. I spoke out against getting coaching for a while when I was playing League of Legends. I didn't want to get coaching to get better because I really wanted to see if I could make it as a personal journey, personal improvement. But eventually, when you get to a point where a sport is like a really robust thing, then young players, they need help. They need to be taught the different strategies, the different tactics, the different, in traditional sports, the different mechanics of a sport. How to do it all properly, what you should focus on, all those different things. It's a really important thing that you have guidance because there can be really talented players that don't end up living up to their potential, that don't end up living up to the talent that they possess if they don't have the proper guidance and the proper support system to allow them to become the next great pro. Because they're like, they're like, I don't know what a good analogy would be. There's something that's unfiltered that needs to be filtered. There's something that's unrefined that needs to be refined. If you just leave it there, there's no guarantee that it will live up to its potential. There's no guarantee that the next great prodigy will live up to their potential, and that there's certainly plenty of circumstances where if you don't have that clear path, then the next great pros won't show up. And if that happens, then that will definitely spell death for League of Legends. So I think that's something that I hope Riot can streamline a little bit better, because that's also a really fun thing to see, you know? One of the coolest things about following minor leagues is that, you know, you're watching the next great, amazing pros. If you're watching college football, if you're watching high school football in North America, you're watching the next great John Elways and Brett Favres and Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady's. And you're seeing them when they're still so far away from all the success they'll get. But it'll be fun to see that beginning and that journey that they go on. And there is no way to watch that in League of Legends, much less a clear path for individuals to actually take to becoming pro. Anyway, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast. I hope you guys all enjoyed watching it. Again, I want to apologize a little bit here for the fact that I did not spend nearly enough time watching LCS or LEC or LPL or LCK this past week. I'm going to see if I can spend some more time watching in the upcoming week. I definitely want to see the game between Fnatic and G2, and see a little bit more about how North America shakes out with the weird 6-way tie for first. I'm also really curious to see if Afreeca can keep up their streak. Maybe this is something I can do at the end of podcasts in the future. That could be a fun thing, right? Talk a little bit about what I'm watching in this upcoming week. Well, in this upcoming week, I'm going to be watching LCK firstly. I definitely want to see. Let's pull up the LCK schedule, actually, because I definitely do not have it memorized. But in LCK, I definitely want to pay attention because there's actually a bit of it's not a legitimate tie for first, because there's 4 teams who all have 3-1 series records, but because of tiebreakers and because of the actual games in those series, some teams winning 2-0, 2-1 or whatever, they don't actually shake out the same way. But right now, Sandbox, Afreeca, Kingzone, and Griffin all have 3-1 series so far. And I'm really curious to see if Griffin and Kingzone continue to pull ahead, or maybe Afreeca, seeing as they did just beat Kingzone, they'll be able to beat them. Afreeca will be playing against Sandbox and Gen G in this upcoming week. So that will be interesting, because Sandbox, they have the same record as Afreeca right now, and Gen G's 500. They're 5-5 in their games total and 2-2 in their series. So they could go either way. They could end up being really good or end up disappointing and possibly fighting against relegation again. That'll be interesting to see. SK Telecom is playing against Damwon and Griffin. Oh my goodness. Griffin, Saturday, the 22nd. Okay, all of you guys, you should pay attention to that, because that will be really fun to see. That could be an opportunity for SKT to turn things around. You know, they are not looking like they can beat Griffin currently, but of course they did end up beating them in their series against them in the spring finals. So who knows? Maybe Griffin could choke again. That would be interesting. KT Rolster is also kind of interesting because they're 5-5, the same as Gen G, and I'm curious to see if they're actually going to be able to make something happen. They obviously have Prey now, and I don't know. I haven't actually watched much KT this year, but they've won enough that I can imagine they probably won't be relegated, so that would be cool. Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of interesting stuff to follow, though. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend following Afreeca this week, following SKT, maybe following a little bit of Griffin, a little bit of KT Rolster, a little bit of Griffin. That's what I will be paying attention to in LCK. I also mentioned I'm going to be watching a little bit more LEC, paying attention to that Fnatic series against G2. What else is going on in LEC? Are there any other interesting series? LEC has like a huge... What is that? Is that a 6-way tie? There's a huge 6-way tie for third. So, again, it's still really early no team has played more than 4 games, or less than 4 games. Every team has only played 4 games, so it's still really early to say that, oh, one team's going to be really good or one team's going to be really bad. I'm a little bit sad to see the Italian Stallion and Team Vitality doing so poorly. I might root for Schalke 04 because they're like the only team that has Germans on them right now. They also have Trick and Ignar. I forgot about that. And Odo Omne. I've always liked Odo Omne. In China, I would actually like to see if I can pay a little bit of attention to the LPL, and I would recommend that you guys pay a little bit of attention as well. Oh no, that's Edward. I was going to say Invictus Gaming is actually doing better. Invictus Gaming right now is in 9th. They would miss out on playoffs if they end where they are right now. That's actually pretty interesting. I'm curious to see what's going to happen there. I don't know that. I think because there are so many more teams I think because there's so many more teams in the Chinese league, the championship points end differently. Yeah, so if Invictus ends 7th or lower, then they will get 0 championship points, and that might end up messing them up and causing them to miss out on qualification. So that would be really interesting to see what ends up happening with them, because you would imagine they would be able to make it back to Worlds, but they've definitely been struggling, and that's something that's worth paying attention to. Similarly, I've talked a lot in the past. China is a region that just consistently cannibalizes itself. I might go on and talk about that a little bit more in the future, but there's a lot of promise in a few teams like Fun Plus Phoenix and Royal Never Give Up that it's left to be seen whether they're going to even be able to make Worlds, much less have some serious success there. And then, of course, in NA, I'm going to be very curious to see if CLG can pull out and hopefully return to former glory. Looks like they're playing against FlyQuest and C9. That C9 series will be interesting to watch. That's worth paying attention to. And I do hope Echo Fox can turn things around. But anyway, on that note, I hope you guys all enjoyed watching today's podcast. I had a lot of fun with it. I will see you all next week. Make sure you guys check out the podcast on YouTube. Check it out on SoundCloud. If you feel like it, you can support me on Patreon and help produce the podcast. I'm also getting some other Patreon rewards and content out for you guys there. So you can go ahead and check that out, seeing as we rebooted that recently. But anyway, once again, thank you all very much. If you're listening to me now, listen to all the way to the end of the podcast. I will see you all next week. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.